gentlemen, here's Johnny.
Johnny Carson welcomed Hollywood's brightest stars, but 9 of them left him furious.
I stopped doing jokes immediately as soon as people found out that he was an alcoholic and had emotional problems.
Disturbed or deeply uneasy. From cruel behavior to hidden scandals that later rocked Hollywood, these so-called icons revealed sides that no audience ever expected.
Some too?
Oh, sure. Makes you strong and tall.
Insiders, crew, and even Carson himself whispered about the guests he secretly despised. They were beloved by fans, but their darker truths couldn't stay buried forever. Today, we expose the Golden Age legends Carson never wanted back on his stage. Bob Hope. Bob Hope was one of the most famous entertainers of the 20th century. Known for his movies, radio shows, United Service Organizations tours, and especially his long career on National Broadcasting Company television. Yet when it came to The Tonight Show, Johnny Carson secretly considered him one of his least favorite guests. The reasons were many, even if Carson always showed respect in public. Hope's reputation was legendary, but his actual visits on Carson's stage left the host frustrated, tired, and sometimes even dreading the appearance. Unlike other guests who came to talk freely and share real moments, Hope treated the talk show couch like another set for one of his television specials. He arrived with writers, rehearsed jokes, and a fixed routine that left no space for Carson's sharp wit or natural humor. This scripted style clashed with Carson's own way, which valued easy conversation and surprise laughter. Another problem was the number of visits. Hope was so powerful at the National Broadcasting Company that he could request a spot whenever he wanted to promote something, whether it was a new special, an event, or even reruns. Carson disliked the constant self-promotion, but could not really say no. Privately, he often sighed, again, when Hope's name appeared on the booking list. As Hope grew older, things became harder. His eyesight and hearing weakened, so if Carson asked a question that was not in the plan, Hope sometimes became confused, answered the wrong thing, or sat in silence until a cue card saved him. Carson found this both uncomfortable and sad, since he prized quickness and surprise. After one show, he even told his staff, "If I ever end up like that, I want you to shoot me." Though he still honored Hope's place in history, Carson admitted to close friends that he was not a real admirer, and his writers agreed that Hope brought nothing spontaneous. In the end, both men were National Broadcasting Company legends, but their styles never matched, and that is why Carson counted Bob Hope among his least favorite guests. Joan Crawford. Joan Crawford was one of Hollywood's most famous stars, celebrated for her sharp cheekbones, elegant clothes, and powerful presence on the movie screen. By the time she appeared on Johnny Carson's Tonight Show in the year 1970, she carried decades of fame, success, and influence. On camera, she was graceful and polished, answering every question with charm and wit. Yet, many people who worked with her spoke of a colder, more demanding side, which earned her the chilling nickname, the Ice Queen. Stories from behind the curtain often painted Joan as someone deeply focused on control. According to Hollywood stories, she made strict demands about her surroundings, from the studio temperature to the exact way the lights should fall on her face. Crew members whispered that nothing ever seemed just right. While she was polite and respectful to Johnny Carson, her patience with others was thin. One story described how she snapped at a young assistant, insulting her and demanding she be replaced. Whether all of these details are completely true or not, such stories fed the image of Joan as a woman who ruled with fear rather than kindness. Carson, famous for his sharp instincts, seemed to notice this hidden chill. He never attacked her openly, but insiders remembered him describing her interviews as stiff, almost like talking to a statue. To the audience watching at home, Joan shone with glamour. But to those working backstage, she could feel distant and cold. Her image grew darker after her death in 1977, when her adopted daughter Christina released the memoir Mommy Dearest in 1978. The book described years of emotional pain, punishments, and frightening outbursts at home. Some denied these stories, but others supported them. Today, Joan Crawford remains a legend, part shining star, part lasting shadow. Tom Snyder. Tom Snyder was a well-known late-night host who became famous for The Tomorrow Show, which ran on the National Broadcasting Company from 1973 to 1982, right after Johnny Carson's The Tonight Show. Snyder's program was very different from Carson's. Where Carson liked jokes, skits, and light conversation, Snyder preferred long, serious interviews with newsmakers, authors, and controversial figures. His style stood out because he laughed loudly, smoked cigarettes on camera, and often let guests talk for long stretches of time. Some people admired his honesty, but others found him stiff or boring. One of his harshest critics, at least in private, was Johnny Carson himself. According to Carson's longtime lawyer and close friend, Henry Bushkin, Carson disliked Snyder from the very beginning. In Bushkin's memoir, he wrote that Carson often called Snyder talentless and boring, and described him as an officious bore. To Carson, Snyder lacked the spark and energy that late-night television needed, and Carson never warmed to his personality either on the screen or off it. The tension between the two men came to a head one evening in the late 1970s at Chasen's, a famous restaurant in West Hollywood where many stars gathered. Carson was dining with Ed McMahon, his wife, and several friends when he noticed Snyder sitting alone at another table. Carson had been drinking, and the sight of Snyder seemed to set him off. According to Bushkin, Carson suddenly stood up, walked toward Snyder, and leaned across the table in a threatening way, appearing to go for Snyder's throat. Ed McMahon and others quickly pulled him back before things turned into a physical fight. Witnesses said the moment was brief but shocking, especially because Carson usually kept his anger well hidden from the public. This restaurant story became one of the most dramatic examples of Carson's dislike for another television host. While Carson could be competitive, he usually handled rivals with silence or distance rather than open hostility. His problem with Snyder seemed to run deeper. Carson disliked Snyder's show, disliked his style, and, by Bushkin's account, disliked the man himself. It did not help that Snyder followed Carson on the National Broadcasting Company every night, meaning Carson could not completely ignore him. Some people who worked in television at the time believed Carson thought Snyder's presence lowered the quality of the National Broadcasting Company's late-night lineup. In the end, the clash between Carson and Snyder shows how different personalities in late-night television sometimes collided. Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra was one of the biggest stars of the 20th century. On stage, he had a warm smile and a velvet voice that millions loved. On television, he looked relaxed and friendly, especially when he sat across from Johnny Carson on The Tonight Show. But behind the charm, Sinatra carried a darker side that Carson and his staff never forgot. Sinatra was known for his quick temper. He liked things done his way, and when they weren't, he often lashed out. Stories from Hollywood describe him shouting at hotel managers, insulting waiters, and even throwing punches when he felt disrespected. His reputation for being close with mob figures only made people more cautious around him. Many insiders said Being part of Sinatra's world meant walking on eggshells, never knowing when his mood would shift. Carson, however, was not easily intimidated. He respected Sinatra's talent, but hated how he treated the people who worked behind the scenes. One famous story from The Tonight Show tells how Sinatra once lost his patience with a floor manager who gave him a time warning. Instead of laughing it off, Sinatra grabbed the man by his tie and pulled him close. The studio froze, unsure of what would happen next. Carson quickly stepped in, telling Sinatra firmly, "We don't talk about my staff that way here." It was a rare moment where Carson's calm wit turned into open defense of his crew. Sinatra's behavior didn't stop there. He often canceled appearances at the last minute, leaving producers scrambling. When he did show up, he sometimes made rude remarks to assistants or technicians, as if their work was beneath him. Carson, who valued professionalism, began to grow tired of it. Though he kept things polite on air, he reportedly made a decision behind the scenes. Sinatra's bookings on The Tonight Show would be limited. For Carson, who usually welcomed stars back again and again, this was unusual. Even Ed McMahon, Carson's longtime sidekick, told stories of tense moments between the two men. In one memory, Carson interrupted Sinatra's dramatic entrance at a piano bar, loudly cursing him for not keeping his word about the time. It showed that Carson wasn't afraid to call Sinatra out, even when others stayed quiet. Over the years, the contrast between Sinatra's public image and private behavior became clearer. Fans saw him as smooth and lovable, but those who worked close to him often saw someone very different, a man who could be a bully when he didn't get his way. Carson, who built his career on charm and respect, simply could not stand that side of him. Bette Davis. Bette Davis was one of Hollywood's brightest stars, known for her sharp eyes, strong voice, and bold performances. The world saw her as glamorous and witty, but many who worked with her found her difficult, demanding, and sometimes unkind. This reputation gave her the nickname of a verbal assassin. On film sets, she was famous for her fiery temper and endless demands about costumes, lighting, and dialogue. If she thought something was not perfect, she could delay the entire production. And she was never afraid to argue with directors or producers. Sometimes, she even walked away from projects if she believed she was being treated unfairly. She brought this same energy to interviews and public appearances, including her visits to The Tonight Show. Her sharp tongue and heavy drinking sometimes made her unpredictable. On camera, she could be funny and charming, but behind the scenes, she often interrupted other guests, scolded staff members, and even threw insults that shocked people. One story often told is how she humiliated a cue card holder so harshly that Johnny Carson himself stepped in to protect the staff member. Carson admired Davis's great talent and respected her history as a star from the golden age of Hollywood, but he also found her impatient and unwilling to follow the light-hearted rhythm of a talk show, which depended on friendly back-and-forth conversation instead of one person taking full control. Her reputation for brutal honesty was not limited to Carson's stage. Biographies and memoirs describe how Davis spoke without a filter about co-stars, directors, and even cultural matters. Some fans admired her courage, while others thought she was simply cruel. By the early 1980s, her career was slowing, her health was getting weaker, and her wit had become even sharper, sometimes painfully so. Because her appearances were risky for a live show watched by millions, Carson and his team quietly chose not to invite her again. To viewers at home, she was still the glamorous star of films such as All About Eve and Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, but to people behind the cameras, she was a storm of quick insults, pride, and unpredictable moods. Mickey Rooney. Mickey Rooney was once the biggest child star in Hollywood. In the 1930s and 1940s, his name filled movie theaters, and he was praised as one of the most talented young actors of his time. But as the years passed, Rooney's life and career turned much harder. He struggled with money problems, went through many failed marriages, and battled with alcohol and sleeping pills. His bright star became dim, weighed down by troubling behavior that many people could no longer ignore. When Rooney appeared on talk shows later in life, including The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson, he did not always bring the same charm that once made him so loved. Reports say that Rooney sometimes showed up after drinking and would ramble during interviews. Instead of the sharp, funny stories that Carson wanted for his late-night audience, Rooney often drifted into long tales about his past fame. Carson, who valued quick timing and smooth flow, sometimes had to cut him off mid-story just to keep the show moving. Behind the scenes, staff members began to dread working with him because they never knew what mood he would bring to the set. Stories also spread about Rooney acting in ways that were not respectful toward women. Biographers and later reports described him as someone who at times crossed lines, whether through unkind words or unwanted behavior. A former assistant even said in legal papers that Rooney was a mean, abusive boss who yelled often and treated people poorly. Some books and articles claimed he arranged fake auditions to take advantage of young women, though these accusations remain debated and are not fully proven. Still, the image that formed was of a man who could be very difficult, especially when the cameras were off. Carson himself was known for staying calm on stage, even with guests he did not enjoy, but insiders say Rooney tested his patience more than once. In one story, Carson privately apologized to a young actress who felt uncomfortable with Rooney's actions on set. Though Carson never said much in public, crew members noticed that Rooney's visits became fewer over the years. Carson even chose to tape his appearances earlier in the day, rather than risk problems during the live evening show. By the end of his career, Mickey Rooney was remembered as both a Hollywood legend and a troublemaker. On screen, he left behind a huge legacy of films, shows, and performances. But behind the spotlight, he was seen by many as unpredictable, hard to work with, and often unkind. Shelley Winters, the powder keg. Shelley Winters was one of the most difficult guests that Johnny Carson ever faced on The Tonight Show. Unlike most stars who came to chat politely and promote their work, Shelley Winters often took over the interviews with long monologues or fiery political rants. She could turn a simple question about a movie into a 5-minute speech filled with emotion, leaving Johnny Carson struggling to take back control. The staff had to stay alert whenever she appeared, because her behavior was unpredictable and sometimes explosive. One of the most famous moments happened with actor Oliver Reed. When he made a comment that she did not like, Shelley Winters suddenly threw a drink on him during the live taping. The audience gasped with shock, and the moment showed that she could be confrontational and even disrespectful, even while appearing on national television. This was not a single event. Reports from the show's staff say that she often ignored the planned flow of the program, went against the producers, and dominated conversations in ways that disrupted the show. Her difficult behavior did not stay only on the stage. Shelley Winters was known for being very blunt and verbally harsh, sometimes making others on the set feel uncomfortable. While some of her outbursts came from strong passion, she often crossed the line between having opinions and being cruel. She frequently refused to follow simple directions from the staff, which created tension behind the scenes. Although Johnny Carson reportedly respected the fact that she always believed in what she said, her lack of self-control made her one of the hardest guests he ever had to handle. Shelley Winters' unpredictable and intense style meant that each appearance was like a gamble. Johnny Carson, who was known for staying calm and professional, sometimes struggled to keep the show moving smoothly when she was there. She had no problem with interrupting others, taking over the conversation, or creating awkward situations for fellow guests and staff members. Although she appeared several times in the 1970s and 1980s, she became a guest that the staff both feared and dreaded. Her combative attitude and reputation for chaos made her difficult to manage. Even though she was a talented actress, her behavior often overshadowed her work, turning her into a problem for the show instead of an entertaining guest. Wayne Newton. In 1980, a bitter fight started between entertainer Wayne Newton and television host Johnny Carson, and it was centered around the ownership of the Aladdin Hotel in Las Vegas. Johnny Carson, who was famous for his late-night talk show, had worked with Las Vegas developer Ed Nigro in an effort to buy the Aladdin Hotel, which was having financial problems and had earlier been linked with organized crime groups. Their attempt did not succeed, and Wayne Newton, who had often been a guest on Carson's program, finally acquired the hotel for $85 million. This event upset Carson, and he began making jokes on his show about Newton's purchase, suggesting that it had secret connections to the mob. Newton, who was very hurt by these comments, filed a defamation case against the National Broadcasting Company and its reporters. He said that their news reports made people believe his hotel purchase was supported by organized crime groups. Newton explained in court that the whole deal was financed by Valley Bank of Nevada, and not by any mob money. In 1986, a federal jury awarded him $22.8 million in damages, but the decision was later canceled in an appeal. The long legal fight caused Newton major financial troubles, and in 19, he filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy to reorganize about $20 million in debts. This feud showed how celebrity rivalries and media jokes could cause lasting harm to reputations and even lead to serious financial struggles. Jerry Lewis. Jerry Lewis, a comedy legend famous for his slapstick style and charity work, had a very troubled relationship with Johnny Carson, the well-known host of The Tonight Show. On stage, Lewis was seen as a much-loved entertainer who made people laugh, but behind the scenes, his behavior was often reported to be difficult. This led Carson to call him truly hateful and to ban him from the show after the early 1980s. Many reports say that Lewis's visits to the show were full of problems. He often interrupted Johnny Carson while he was speaking, straightened his tie in a way that looked like he was showing power, and used sharp or sarcastic comments. His behavior did not stop when the cameras were off. Away from the spotlight, Lewis was said to insult staff members, even cameramen, for very small mistakes. This created a tense and uncomfortable mood on the set, which made Carson lose more and more patience with him. Johnny Carson had a strong reputation for being polite, professional, and respectful to the people who worked with him. He believed everyone on the set deserved fairness and kindness. Because of this, he found Lewis's behavior impossible to accept. Carson reportedly described him as truly hateful and chose to cut off all ties. From the early 1980s onward, Jerry Lewis was not allowed back on The Tonight Show. Such a decision was very unusual for Carson, which showed how serious the matter was. The ban became a clear lesson in the entertainment world. It showed that respect and professionalism are just as important as talent. Jerry Lewis gave comedy many great moments, but his poor treatment of others left a shadow over his career, reminding people that lasting success depends on character as well as skill. We hope you enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for more amazing stories.